guys, so I am super excited for today's video because I am going to be discussing one of my favorite series of all time and kind of giving you a rundown of it, of the different parts of it, and what I think, what I like, what I may not like, what you may like and may not like. And that is the Mistborn series. We are specifically going to be comparing and contrasting and talking about Era 1 versus Era 2. This is going to be completely spoiler free. So if you have not read Era 1, you're good. If you have not read Era 2, you're good. I will not be spoiling this series for you because it is one of my favorites. It's fantastic and I think everyone should read it. I think most people, at least that like follow me, have read Era 1. But I feel like a lot of people don't talk about Era 2. And I feel like it's because, I mean, look at the difference. This is book 1 of Era 1. This is book 1 of Era 2. Like, the difference in size, like, it's so different. Like, it's just such a shorter book series than this one is. But, y'all, if you haven't read Era 2, but you've read Era 1, go read Era 2. We're just gonna start off by saying that because I absolutely love it. And a lot of people will talk about how different they are, and yes, they are completely different. But in such a good way. I absolutely love it. I love the transition from 1 to 2. Like, we're just gonna talk about it all. And so settle in, grab a snack because you might need it. This may run a little long. But we're just going to talk about one of my favorite book series ever. Of course, we're going to start off talking about Era 1. This is the first book in Era 1 Mistborn, The Final Empire. And y'all, for one, these hardcovers, like, these are my favorite editions of Mistborn. I don't think Mistborn has as many like really pretty editions as they should, but these like US hardbacks that I paid a pretty penny for because like they're like, it was hard to find them. Worth it. They're beautiful. Like these dust jackets, that art, I love it. Might be an unpopular opinion. I don't know. I love it. But we're gonna start out talking about it. What is the Mistborn series? Era 1 specifically. It is a adult epic high fantasy series that's kind of set in a traditional fantasy setting. We have probably one of my favorite opening lines, "Ash fell from the sky." Like, it's just so recognizable. We're following a couple different characters. Our main character in Era 1 is Vin. She is a young girl who is kind of like this like street rat type character. She's involved with these like kind of sketchy characters at the beginning that are using her. And then we also have Kelsier, who is like our main kind of like hero of the book, and he kind of like gets her and trains her up, and you know, come to find out they are what they call Mistborn, which means they can, you know, use metals to have powers. Basically, I love the way my friend Monica described it after reading book 1 as they're like mini Magnetos, which cracked me up. I thought was hysterical, and you know what? She ain't wrong. They use metals to, you know, get out their powers. And there are people in this world that can use, you know, one metal, and then that's pretty common. You know, it's not as common as like normal people, but it's more common to be able to like burn and use one metal for a different power. Well, our Mistborns are people that can use all the metals and have all the powers, and they're very rare in this world, but very powerful. Vin and Kelsier are both those people. Basically, in this book, we are following Vin and Kelsier and this group that are trying to bring down the Lord Ruler who has ruled over this land with an iron fist for the past like 1,000 years. He is immortal. And, you know, they're trying to bring him down and bring about equality and you eat the rich, and it's great, right? It's Viva la Revolution. Insert music that Alan likes to use in his videos.
Revolution! They're gonna overthrow the final empire.
And it's just, it's a pretty, like, typical, I would say, fantasy feeling story in that aspect. you know, we have Ven, who is like the young girl, and then this group of a bunch of men, because she's of course the only like real like main female, which depending on how you feel about it, that may not be the best. And like Sanderson has actually gone back and said that is something I believe that he like kind of regrets, and he wished he had more females in it. And actually he was working on like a screenplay for Era 1, and he said that he wanted to change some of the crew members to females for the screenplay, which I thought was amazing. So that is one thing. It's like pretty typical as far as like one girl and a bunch of guys, and she's like the chosen one kind of, and it feels very traditional fantasy. In Era 1, we do have a romance subplot, and it isn't like a huge thing, but like it is a pretty important aspect of the story, and it does feel pretty traditional fantasy romance. I love it though. I love the love interest. I love them together. I love it. Okay, you would not convince me that it's a bad romance. Do they have their cheesy moments? Yes. Some cheesy dialogue? Yes. But I still really like it. And you also have to remember that they are like teenagers. They are still teenagers in this book, right? So we're still following like a 17-year-old girl and like an 18-year-old boy. So it's like they're not fully grown adults. They are teenagers. They kind of act like teenagers. You know, their dialogue's kind of cheesy. There's some miscommunication and a little, but like not anything like that throws you off or is bad. But there is more of a romance subplot in Era 1. Along with it, we get this really cool magic system. It is probably one of my favorite magic systems. I actually did a video the other day talking about my all-time favorite magic systems, and of course this was included in it because why wouldn't it be? It is a hard magic system with rules, and you know what you're getting, and these rules don't change, and it's just so well done, so well thought out, and just so unique. Like I said, they burn metals, so they have these like little vials with like water or whatever in it, and like the metal, and they drink it, and then they can like flare it and burn it within themselves. But then once it's out, it's out. Once your body has used it, you have to drink more. And I think that's really cool because it also shows like, yes, you have to have an innate ability to use the magic, but it can run out and it has consequences, and like there's all these rules set up with it. And I really love that. And I love how in-depth and detailed that Sanderson gets with the magic. And then there's also like a secondary like magic system that goes along with it that also uses metals, just in a different way, and I thought that was really cool. But they don't really like, you know, go together. It's like you're this or you're that, right? Remember that. You're an allomancer or a feruchemist. I probably didn't say that right. But the feruchemist can use the metals in different ways. Like they have powers to like make their weight bigger or smaller, or store memories, things like that. Not necessarily the way that Mistborn can like push on metal and pull on it and like see better and stuff like that. Like they have, you know, kind of differing abilities based on if you're an allomancer or a feruchemist. This is also a very long series. Like the books are long. They are 500+ page novels, and you know, some people don't like super long books. I do. The longer the better, give me it. But I think they are a lot longer. They're a lot longer than Era 2's books, which are a lot shorter, as you saw earlier. But this is, you know, it's a long series. It's a very dark series. There's a lot of like dark, violent moments within it. It's not got a whole lot of humor. It's pretty like dim in tone, if you know what I mean. Like it's a very dark world, a dark book, a violent book. Obviously it's not gory or anything like that. Like I wouldn't say that, but it is, you know, darker and more violent. We also have a lot of undertones of religion, different religions. I really like how Sanderson worked the religions into this. I love really well done religions in my fantasy books. I just always have. I think it's like a really fun thing to learn about and play around with, like how different religions would work, how they work together, because in this world there's so many different religions that have been or are, and you know, in Era 1 a lot of them are, you know, not practiced or they're lost and they're just kind of pushed to the side. But there are a lot of different religions and religious undertones and questioning reality based on these different religions, and I love seeing that. I think it's really well done. It's done with care. It's, you know, one of those things where it's like all religions are right and all religions are wrong, because like they can be both at the same time and there's not always just one that works. So that was something that I really, really liked about Era 1. So overall, Era 1, I would say, is more of a traditional fantasy novel for people who traditionally read epic fantasy. I think it's a really good transitional book from YA to adult, because you have a lot of those things that you typically see in a YA book, you know, the young female lead and then the subplot of romance and overthrowing a lord ruler, and like it kind of lends itself to being a very good adult book for people that have been reading YA for quite some time. So I really, really appreciate that. And it's also a great book for adults who love adult fantasy, because it is adult fantasy. We do have our older characters, like our whole crew is like grown men. Like Kelsier, I believe, is like 40. And it's like most of our characters are older except for like Ven and Ellen. Like those are our like younger characters, and I think like Spook. But all in all, it's such a good series. It is a great series to get into adult fantasy with. It's a great series to like just pick up when you need something that's like, man, I need something, just a really good in-depth fantasy novel that I can really just sink my teeth into and enjoy and read slowly and just like learn this world. It's amazing. I definitely recommend reading Era 1 if you haven't. But I feel like most of you already have. So, getting into it, we are now going to discuss Era 2, which is lovingly referred to as the Wax and Wane, the Yeehaw Era, whatever you want to call it. Era 2 takes place like 300 years, I believe, after the events of Hero of Ages, which is the last book in Mistborn Era 1. So a lot has changed. A lot changes between the end of Era 1 and the start of Era 2. You've got to think 300 years has passed. Time has progressed. Technology has progressed and things have gotten better and different and has changed. This is basically a Wild West flintlock fantasy. As you can see, it's a lot shorter too. So it's easier to get into. It's short. Like, this didn't take me any time to read. It's 300 pages, a little over 300 pages in Shadows of Self, Alloy of Law, which is the first book. Then Shadows of Self is the second, and Bands of Mourning is the third one. We don't have book 4 yet. It doesn't have a title. Does it have a title? I think it has no title. I don't remember what the title is. I think we have it though. But it's book 4 in the Wax and Wane Yeehaw Era. And that should actually be coming out within a year, I believe is what Sanderson said. So like November of 2022, I think we're finally getting book 4 in this era, and that will be the wrap up of Era 2. What makes this different from Era 1? So much. Like I said, it's shorter for one. It's also a lot lighter, I feel like. It has got more humor in it, mainly thanks to one character named Wayne, who is just like, you're gonna love him or hate him, but I think he is hysterical and I adore him. And he's always like joking and making jokes, and like nothing is serious with him until it is. And it's like, he's that character that like makes all these jokes and is funny and is the comic relief, but like deep down inside he's real troubled and has like his own issues that he's dealing with. And I love that contrast where it's like, you see like the person who's like so outgoing and bubbly and happy and fun on the outside, but like really they're going through their own internal struggles. They just don't let you see that. And I think that's really relatable about Wayne, and I can see why he annoys people, because like, man, some of the stuff that comes out of that guy's mouth is like, dude. But I appreciate him. I love him and all his eccentricities, and he's just funny. And I think he makes the series just much more lighthearted than the first era, We also have Wax, who is our main character, and then we also have Marasi and Steris. So we actually have a like 4-character kind of like main group consisting of 2 men and 2 women. So I feel like in Era 2 we have more of a diversity when it comes to the genders of our protagonists, which I actually really like. I really like Marasi. I really like Steris. Like, I didn't love her at first, but then as I got more into the series, I absolutely adore Steris. Like, she might be one of my favorite characters. So just don't sleep on Steris. She's fantastic. Also in this book, the series really, our characters are aged up. So they're much older than like Ven and Elend were. They're like, I think like Wax is in like his 40s and like Steris is almost 40, I want to say. And then Wayne and Marasi are a little bit younger, but they're not like children, but they're younger. But I just love that we have like these older characters that we're following in Era 2. Again, this is more of like a flintlock fantasy. So we have kind of the same magic system, only a little bit different, a little bit more advanced. We see what would happen after 300 years and like people, you know, intermixing and, you know, the magic kind of changing along with them as people, you know, marry and have children, and like what would happen to the magic system. Like I don't think ever see a Mistborn in this book, but we have a lot of people that are like mistings that can use like 1 metal, and then we have people that what they're called twinborn, who have like 1 ability from allomancy and 1 ability from Ferukami, which I still don't think I'm saying correctly, but we're rolling with it. And I just think that's really cool how those two, remember in the first book you had either or, and in this like continuation series you can kind of intermix them. So I thought that was really cool, just to show how the magic would advance. And you know, also it's flintlock, so we have guns, and it shows how like allomancy would work with bullets and guns and trains, and you know, we're starting to introduce like automobiles, and it's just really cool seeing the progression of technology and how the magic works with that progression of technology. There's also not as much romance in Era 2 as there is in Era 1. Like, romance is really just not on the table so much. We do have, you know, some moments and stuff like that, and actually I absolutely love it. But like, we don't really get even like a romantic subplot until Bands of Mourning. Like, we get little bits and pieces of Wax and his past relationship, but we don't really get like a current romance at all. We get like little bits and pieces, and then in Bands of Mourning we get just a little bit more, which I absolutely loved. Absolutely loved. Yeah, there's not as much romance. It's not as heavy as it was in Era 1. And Era 1 still was not romance heavy, but like we get even less of it in this series, which honestly, I don't hate. I thought it was great. I also really love how Era 1 plays a huge part in the world of Era 2. The events that happened in Era 1 are now history. They are now like what these people currently are like learning, and they have, you know, their religions are based completely around the events of Era 1. There are, you know, multiple religions that sprung up from the events of Era 1, which I think are really interesting to see. It's really cool to see how these characters think of the people from Era 1 as like their historical figures, and they're like held on this like pedestal, but it's like we know them in their like human selves, but these people see them as these like elevated people from history. And like the slight differences from like how these characters think of like Ven and Kelsier, and how like Ven and Kelsier really were in our knowledge. Like, it's just really cool to see, and it's really cool to see how the religions have sprung up around it, and like you know, the little mentions here and there of, you know, Ven and Kelsier and like the events of Era 1 like are very heavily influential in Era 2. So it's not like we don't have any of that. Like, we have a lot of that. And honestly, book 3, Bands of Mourning, is what really ties the two together. So book 1 and 2 are great, and they're fast reads and they're fun, and you do get things here and there, and you get, you know, introduced to characters that they're talking about, characters from Era 1 and like the religions and stuff. But book 3 just really brings them both together, which is why I'm so excited for book 4 to come out and conclude this era, because I need to know what happens next. But we get a whole lot of lore from Era 1 in this book. We get a whole lot of like what happened and what happened after and what's going on now that's based on things that happened in Era 1, and we're learning so much. And then the very like last part of this book, my mind was blown. Like, the things that happened at the very end of this book had me like, what? And like in the best way. And then it had me want to go back and like reread it, because I was like, wait, what did I miss? How did I miss this? And then it's fantastic, right? This book really ties the eras together. It really makes a lot of the lore make sense. And you're like, whoa, like it's mind-blowing, right? Like, I love how Sanderson just weaves these little threads throughout the whole thing. And then when you go back and reread, stuff starts to like really stick out to you that didn't the first time. The final thing that I absolutely love about Era 2 is that we have a beautiful representation of a character on the autism spectrum. And Sanderson tried to do this once before in Elantris and failed. He bombed it. It was not good. Like, his representation in that book was it just didn't hit the mark, and he knew that. And so he took that criticism and put it into doing something better. And our character that we get that is on the autism spectrum in this series is so well done. He has, you know, beta readers and sensitivity readers, and like he really takes feedback. And I love where he came from and where he finally got to with the amazing representation in this series with it. Like, Steris is on the autism spectrum, and she is fantastic, and she's nuanced, and she's so well written, and one of my favorite characters, honestly. I absolutely adore Steris. I will fight you for that. She's just so good, and it's like, she's got this like personality where it's like you don't want to like her at first, and you're confused by her at first, and then you get to know her and like you absolutely love her. And I just think she's so well done, and I think it really shows that Sanderson takes his criticisms really well and fixes things and changes things and moves forward with things. When, like in Elantris, which I loved Elantris, there is an autistic character that just fell flat and was not good and was just like a total stereotype and just but he does it well, and he brings it back in this story, and I think just does it super well. All in all, it's my favorite series. I love it. I can't wait to see what happens next. He's already planning a third era, by the way. So there's gonna be like an Era 3, and I think that takes place like way after this one. So wait, what? I think it's like Mistborn in Space or something. Like, I don't even know, but I will read it because I'm sure he will do it fantastic and weave the stories together, because that is something that he does so well in his Cosmere universe, is weave these stories together, and like you start to get these little Easter eggs and these like little things, and you're like, wait, I saw that in this one, and then this one, and then all the stories start to come together and make this like one big cohesive story. And I just love how I don't know how this man's brain works, but it is beautiful. Like, he is so skilled and talented, and I just love how he creates a story and a world, and especially one that's rereadable. It's bingeable, it's rereadable. Like, you go back and you catch things that you didn't catch the first time and that start to make sense, and the foreshadowing. Like, I just imagine him with like this big whiteboard and like all these interconnecting strings being like, this is gonna go here and this is gonna go here. Like, that's how I imagine Sanderson's brain looking. So I don't know. This man he's got some skill when it comes to crafting stories that weave together. So if you haven't read Era 2, I highly recommend it, because I feel like so many people are just like, I didn't like it, or I don't want to read it because like I don't want to ruin the first era, or I've heard that it's a lot different, and it is a lot different. It's 300 years of progression and technology and changing of the world, but it's still so good. And yes, we call it the Yeehaw era because it's kind of Wild West flintlock, and it is a lot lighter in tone and it's a lot more fun, I would say. But it's still got like this heart of the Mistborn series as a whole. And I just think it's a great transition. It weaves the story, the way everything advances, and the way you get the Easter eggs and the flashbacks to the first era, and then the things that happened 300 years ago that now are still super important and part of like history and lore, and like how it's kind of changed over time. Like, you just have to read it, right? Like, if you are a Sanderson fan, if you are a fan of the Mistborn Era 1, I really just recommend go and read Era 2 because it's so worth it, y'all. I really think that this era is worth reading, especially with book 4 of Era 2 coming out in November of next year. All right, well, thank you guys for hanging out with me for this long, ranty, chatty video about Mistborn and Era 1 and Era 2 and Wax and Wayne and Ven and Elend and Kelsier and all the people that like I have grown to love and like really, really enjoy this story. So if you've read this, let me know. If you've read Era 2, I would love to hear like your thoughts on Era 1 versus Era 2. Is there anything I missed? Because y'all, there's a lot to miss in these books if you're not paying attention, because man, everything is so just interwoven and it's beautiful. So let me know your thoughts on Era 1, Era 2, if you've read Era 2, if you haven't, if you didn't like it, let me know. We'll have a conversation down below. All right, my name is Jessie and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.